to edition 82, part 1 of our Killa No Filla podcast with me, Rachel Fairburn, and Kiri Pritchard-McLean. Just before we start, we'll do our usual disclaimer. This isn't hero worship. We do this podcast because we have mutual interest in serial killers. As long as we are doing this podcast, it stops us from writing to them in prison.
Yes. What episode was it, sorry?
82.
Oh my God, fucking hell, that's a lot, innit?
Oh, it'll be going into a home soon, this podcast. It'll be sitting there with the other podcasts. It'll be sitting there with My Dad Wrote a Porno. What was the first podcast you ever listened to?
Interesting. I think it was the Ed Gamble and Ray Peacock one.
Oh, wow, that's fucking ages ago, that, isn't it?
Yeah, in fact, when I bought my little house in Manchester, obviously it was a fixer-upper with no heating and, no hot water, no, windows. Yeah, it was a shithole, basically. And one of the things I did was, sand all the floors, and I sanded the entire floor of the downstairs whilst listening to them. So they got me through a lot of DIY, because it's that thing of when you hit a podcast that you like that's easy chat between friends that are funny. It's so easy to just binge it and to get on and do something else because you can kind of dip in and out of it. I imagine that's what people feel about this podcast.
Well, you'd hope so.
Well, actually, Rachel, I'd find it incredibly disrespectful if they did, because we're talking about murder here. I want reverential silence when people listen to this and nothing else.
Yeah, when we do live shows, we want peace. That's what we want, a peaceful environment.
Speaking of live shows, nothing in the offing at the moment, but we're working on it.
Fingers crossed, that will change.
Because old Princess Tits here has decided to go away for Halloween, haven't you?
We could do one a couple of days before Halloween.
Nah.
Why not? What's the problem there?
Well, because then you're just doing it in October, aren't you?
Yeah, but it's still Halloween themed though, isn't it? It's like Halloween's on a fucking Sunday or something this year, isn't it?
Yeah, the Lord's Day.
Yeah, we could... we'll work something out. But Crimbo's coming, innit? And it ain't Christmas without an old killer show.
No, yeah, we're doing our best to work out. But the problem is because obviously everything's open again, all the venues are absolutely packed this winter with rescheduled shows, and obviously venues will be doing panto to try and claw back some dosh. So yeah, we're doing it. We're doing our best.
Yes, so fingers crossed that we'll be able to do something.
How are you guys? We never ask.
Yeah.
And then if you're
it's very much a one-sided relationship, this, isn't it?
What, between you and I?
Yeah.
If you are very lonely and no one asks you that, or no one asks you that, you don't have to be lonely, you could have just paused it then and replied, and maybe it would have helped you feel nice. And
then you could pause it and then listen to this bit. Great, that's nice, good for you.
Yeah. Or, hold on, just to balance out, I'm so sorry, mate. Delete as applicable.
Or, well, I think that's completely your fault.
Or is she going to press charges?
Yeah.
That's covered all the bases, right?
Or, well, let's hear his side of the story.
What did his mum have to say to that? It's fun, this.
It is actually, isn't it? We should tell them who we're doing, shouldn't we?
Well, no, they already know.
Oh, do they know? Well, this came from the last multi-parter, didn't it? See, what's happening now is we're thinking, we'll do this. This seems like this could be one ep. But no, this is another multi-parter, as it turns out.
Yeah.
So apologies to those people that saved them all up.
We're going to try and bang them out quite quickly, but we always say that. And then, well...
Yeah, I think we'll be right with this one. We might have this one.
I think we have put all the dates in. It just means if they come out quite quickly, it means that we've got up somewhere between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. to do it, because that's the only time we can fit in working together.
Which now, what time is it now? 20 past 7.
Yeah.
Which I don't mind, but I mean, I don't know, I'm telling everyone my schedule. I've got to go and get a train soon, so I better crack on, haven't I?
So, the Sunset Strip Killers.
It sounds like a band t-shirt that's a band that doesn't exist that you'd buy from New Look.
Oh my God, I was about to say from New Look. Yeah, it really does.
Do you know, they did one that was really fucking cool, though. You know, if that wasn't from New Look, that'd be a really cracking, cool t-shirt. Because, you know, maybe some dude come up to you and go, can you name 3 songs by that band?
Oh, God. The energy of someone doing that is What does it matter to fucking you?
Exactly. You know, you are allowed to enjoy the aesthetically pleasing design of a band T-shirt.
Do you know what it is as well? It's like, okay, well, if that band has had their logo licensed, that means they've got an injection of cash. Why would you not want the people who you love enough to insist on fucking B-sides from strangers to have some money? It makes no odds to you unless your whole identity is like a fabrication based on like exclusivity. You absolute fucking, to quote you, incel.
This brings me to I bought the uncoolest bit of rock and roll merchandise the other day.
Can I guess what it was?
Please do.
Was it a Noel Gallagher themed douche?
Oh my god, no, that's really upset me. Oh. My heart just went, oh no.
I've got no idea then, that's the only thing I could think of.
It was a Rolling Stones water bottle for the gym.
Oh god.
It was on sale in TK Maxx. I was like, I fucking get that. And I found it quite amusing, but it's very difficult. Once you've got the water in it, it's very difficult to suck the water up. And Ice was talking, I was like trying to drink out of it, because it's like a little straw type thing. I said to Tim, I was like, do you know what? You have more success actually sucking. And Tim went, no, Rachel, please don't. Please don't. I was like, all right, I won't finish the joke that was going to be sucking off one of the old Rolling Stones' dicks and getting water out of it.
Also, you shouldn't make merch that their mouths aren't robust enough to use.
Yeah, exactly.
That doesn't seem right.
Yeah, Keith's going to struggle with that.
Do you know what? Also, can I give you a little tip about that? This is like my, bit in the back of like, what is it, Take a Break.
Yeah.
In my experience, when there has been a water bottle that has been not forthcoming with a liquid inside, a challenging suck, and it's got one of those straw things built in, what I find is giving it sort of a very light unscrew, not so water comes out, but just so the top is slightly looser as opposed to tight how you would expect, how I run everything in my life, actually makes it much easier to suck.
Oh, lovely.
Do try it and do let us know.
I will, yeah, I'll try that later on, I'll let you know.
This is such a wholesome podcast these days.
It is, sort of.
Oh yeah, you were just talking about noshing off Keith Richards.
Oh God, don't, it makes me feel ill. I mean, I'm not ageist, but no.
Do you know what? I bet it would taste like,
Jack Daniels.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, when you have a cig before brushing your teeth. I think his jizz would taste like that.
Do you know, we were talking about this, weren't we? So, someone we know told us that they know somebody who's 20 odd and he's sleeping with Mick Jagger.
Yes.
And we were like, how fucking embarrassing. It's like, you're not sleeping with Mick Jagger in his heyday. You're sleeping with Mick Jagger now. Like, sure, he's a big rock star, but he's an old man.
Yeah, very ageist of you there, Rachel.
I know it is, and I'm not ageist, but if you're going to sleep with an old dude, make it David Attenborough.
That's true. God, I bet he's wild.
I bet he's No, we can't talk about Sir David Attenborough.
We won't do that. We won't do that.
Okay, so, Sunset Strip Killers. There's two of them. Doug Clark and Carol M. Bundy. No relation, to quote our friend Danny Sutcliffe's joke that he has. So we're going to talk about Doug first. He was born... I must say as well, there's 6+ victims that the Sunset Strip Killers killed. I think there's more, definitely, isn't there, than 6?
Yeah, I think so.
I think Doug Clark probably did a few more before he met Carol. Anyway, so Doug was born on March the 10th, 1948 in Pennsylvania. That's where vampiric pencils come from. Yeah.
I don't want to do the podcast anymore.
Okay. Now, his dad was called Franklin Clark. He was a naval intelligence officer, and they moved around a lot because they were a military family. Doug said he'd lived in 37 countries, and he went to sort of an international school as well.
Yeah, which means he'll have that weird sort of transatlantic kind of...
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Like, the people I know who have that weird accent are either people who went to expensive international schools or people who sort of learned to talk from watching the television. There's very little...
Yeah.
Their lifestyles, that nothing else laps over except their accents.
Like when Neighbours first started in the UK and kids started having little Australian accents.
Did they?
Yeah.
That's so cute.
There was a bit of a thing about it, like, what's going on? Why are kids talking like this? Because Neighbours is on twice a day, that's why.
He lived all over. He lived in India, they lived in Switzerland, and the Marshall Islands, which I had to look up because I didn't know where they were, and they sound absolutely lovely.
Yes, apparently so. I remember reading about the Marshall Islands about a year ago. There's a big cocaine haul found there.
Oh, well, great. I'll add that to the list.
So he was quite popular at school, wasn't he? He ended up going to Culver Military Academy, and his father continued to move around.
That was a very prestigious prep school in Indiana, so his education has had a lot of money thrown at it. He's been to good schools. Obviously there's the displacement of like moving around a lot, but I would say he was afforded quite a cushy lifestyle in terms of his education anyway. And we all know loads of people whose parents have been in the military and moved around, and they're not absolute fucking psychos. So.
Well, exactly, yeah. Although he went to these schools and his father was in the military, apparently there was a real lack of discipline at home, which is quite interesting, I think. You'd think it'd be the opposite way around, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you would think, but maybe the dad was the disciplinarian and he wasn't around.
Yeah, that's true.
Rich children with no boundaries are the very worst kind.
Oh, please don't.
Anyway, so as a teenager, he used to... Now, the accounts I can find of this are vague. He used to record his sexual encounters with girls in school without their consent. Now, I don't know if that means he, like, made a tape recording.
Well, he had a video camera, won't he? I imagine.
Not in that... He was born in 1948.
Yeah, so in the 50s...
What, he got a video camera in the 50s?
Yeah,
How could you do that without consent? It would be the noisiest fucking thing in the room.
They had those, like, cine things, didn't they? I don't know.
No, I think he probably made not a tape recording, but yeah, probably a tape recording. I think he would record in that way. I don't think he would film it. But, you know, it's not beyond the realms of possibility. Yeah, so he used to do that. And he had, like, a way with the ladies. He did do well with the girls.
His mother found him wearing his sister's underwear at some point. I mean, if you're going to do that, do what you want. But don't put your fucking sister's kecks on, you fucking weirdo.
Well, that's it for me, isn't it? It's like, how much does... Like, fair enough if your kink is, like, wearing women's underwear. But the flip side of that is, like... sister trumps woman, right? Like, yeah, your overwhelming feeling is going to be, I'm wearing my sister's underwear, not a woman's underwear.
I mean, if he's got access to recording equipment, I think he can find a different pair of knickers from outside of the family.
Yeah, steal them off a washing line.
Yeah.
Primark's got them for 50p.
Did I tell you about that guy that came up to me in Primark once and asked, I might have mentioned this before, asked me about a pair of knickers that he said he'd been sent out to find for somebody.
This rings a bell, but go on.
So basically, this guy came up to me in Primark in Manchester. I was killing time before this gig. He was dressed really weird, like a Soviet-type coat on. And he was like, oh, hi, can you help me? I'm trying to find some knickers for my girlfriend. I was like, right. She's this size, she just needs some black knickers. And I was like, I don't know what to do. So I just walked up and I picked some knickers up and went, how are these? These are the size you want? And he's like, yeah, they're great, thanks. And I'm like, I've been caught in a kink here, haven't I?
Yeah. Was it the same size as you?
I think it might have been. You just one of them where you're like, oh, I can't, the details of this.
You've just been unwittingly sucked into a girlfriend experience.
Oh my God. Ugh. Oh, I feel violated now.
Do you know what? Fine if you've got a thing for stuff like that, but like...
The person on the other end has to be willing
They have to consent. They have to consent. Like, you know, like, people are into feet, absolutely fine, but don't, like, unwittingly ask female comedians to send pictures of their feet.
You know what? Whatever it is you're fucking into, you'll find someone who's into the same thing as you. But you can't just go, oh, I like feet, I want that person to facilitate my fucking fantasy. It's always men. I'm not writing to people asking them to, I don't know, send us a picture of you eating some pasta, am I?
I don't even know what mine would be.
Do you know what mine is? Peace and quiet.
You fucking old bastard. Jesus Christ.
You know, a bit of Kindle time, and that's it.
I think mine is finding dry firewood whilst on a walk. Now I'm in the countryside, that, like, really gets me wide.
Well, actually, do you know, I can smell that. It smells like a nice experience, that, for some reason. I can smell the countryside air and the...
Yeah. Absolutely. Dog's out in his wheelchair, take him to a nice flat surfaced area, and there's some lovely kindling along the way. I don't think we've just spoke about the killer at all so far.
No,
We've been chatting for 20 minutes.
Come on,
so
let's go.
he graduates in 1967. He joins the Air Force. He's discharged by 1979, so not that long. And then the following decade, he just sort of drifts about. He works as a mechanic, and he decided that his...
Can I just say something at this point as well? A documentary I watched, some bird that was on it, says... He had a very high IQ for someone who hadn't been to college. Excuse me? Excuse... That sentence said everything you need to know about that woman.
Yeah, that's not ideal. Some of the solidly thickest people I've ever met, I met whilst in university.
Not been to college, not you've been to university. I've met some people that I'm like, all that money spent on your education and you can't even fucking tie your own shoelaces.
And similarly, you're one of the brightest people I've ever met and not university educated, so it's rarely a marker of anything.
No, it's not. Anyway, so he was, as I say, discharged from the Air Force to being a mechanic. He moved to Los Angeles to become a steam plant operator.
There's another job that he sort of gave himself in this time. So he decided, this is a quote here, that his true vocation was that of a sexual athlete, which is... So Alan Partridge sounding. And he would refer to himself as king of the one-night stand.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Someone did describe him as having a purring voice and big eyes, though, which doesn't make me think, what an attractive man. It does actually make me think of cats that need feeding.
Or Furbies, you know, those things that everyone bought on Christmas. They were like...
Oh, God, he's so unattractive. So... He did move to Los Angeles, he became a steam plant operator, and then he was a boiler operator at Burbank Soap Factory. Now, he was fired from that job because he had a high rate of absence and he kept making violent threats against co-workers, which to me, it sounds like a sitcom character, a boiler operator with who's always blowing his top, who's hot-headed.
Yeah.
It sounds like something that would be in like a 70s sitcom, doesn't it?
Or a Pixar film, you know, that's really on the nose.
Yes, definitely.
Also, I just feel like when I read that thing about that, he was like, would threaten co-workers with violence and was often absent a lot. I was like, he's just living how the rest of us would live if we had no inhibitions. Do you know what I mean? Like, people listening now who don't have weird, transient, lonely jobs like ours, who work with other people, if you never bit your tongue, you would be fired for talking to people like shit and calling in sick whenever you fancied. If capitalism didn't work, basically, or I'm not sure I can assert that it works. If capitalism wasn't very powerful in our community, like we would all be doing exactly the same thing.
Oh, absolutely.
His main income was he would go to bars and sort of pick up older women who would then sort of lavish him with things. And one night he's at the bar. He used to go to one in particular called Little Nashville that was in North Hollywood. Now, remember this bar because it's going to be mentioned again. He meets Carol Bundy, who at the time is a 37-year-old nurse. She's quite awkward. She's drinking alone. She's divorced with 2 kids. There's a lot of focus on what she looks like. They're like, oh, she had glasses and she was overweight with short hair.
Yeah,
but
I think she's got a bit of touch of the Rose West about her.
She does, yeah.
But I think that her main issue was her fucking glasses. They weren't even trendy for the time, were they? Like, if she had a good pair of specs, you know, a decent pair of glasses, she would have looked... a bit, not that it matters what she looks like, but she would have looked a bit better.
There's a lot of focus on her looks in a very strange way.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, she's a fucking piece of shit. But, yeah, I mean...
Well, she is a piece of shit, but we're about to contextualise why, because
that's true.
He had quite a cushy upbringing, it seems, that we know of, and I wouldn't say the same for Carol. She was born on August 26, 1942. She was born Carol May Peters, and she was one of 3. She had a mum called Gladys Peters, and a father called Charles Bundy. Now, when they were arrested, spoiler, and obviously extensively interviewed, she really sort of glossed over her childhood, and she just used to say, oh, it's very happy, and I can only remember things like Christmas, which was very happy, and, you know, we didn't have a lot of money, but my parents worked really hard to make it magical. And she had this story about one she remembers when the Tooth Fairy came her dad would like take one of the dolls and put muddy footprints, you know, across a bit of paper to look like a fairy had walked together. All that kind of stuff that my parents absolutely 100% could not be fucking arsed with. And when she talked about her mum as well, she was like, gosh, she was so charismatic. She was a very glamorous woman. She was so beautiful. And her mum died when she was sort of young. And she tells the story of her finding out her mum died. So it's very strange. She's at home one day with Carol and she says, can you call your father and tell him to come and get me from work? I really don't feel well. So she phones up and she was like, Mum's not well, can you come and get her? So he comes home, gets Gladys, goes to the hospital, and then a couple of hours later walks through the door, and I think Carol is sort of like maybe 13 or 14 at this time, and he just says she's dead. And then she tells this story about, she was like, I run over to him and we throw each other into each other's arms and we just weep there and then in the doorway, and has this sort of like, she kind of describes things like it's happening in a soap opera. So they think that even the like positive things that she's recalling are sort of through the prism of someone who hasn't got the greatest relationship with reality, shall we say. Because the truth was that her father was an alcoholic, violent man who moved the family around because he had, this is an incredible job, very much of the 50s. He was a movie theatre troubleshooter.
Oh.
Yeah. So I think that, you know, cinemas would be, I don't know if it means in like, oh, we can't sell tickets to this, or our projectors.
I imagine like, oh, the projector film's got wrapped round something.
Right.
And he's got to go in and, you know, sort that out.
Yeah.
Her mother was a standing tap dancer as well for a woman, wasn't she? What was she called? The
Ruby Killa, who was a very famous star from sort of the 20s. She was a tap dancer, and yes, her mum worked as a hairdresser, but she also stood in for her. Now, the way that everyone brings it up, and it sounds like it only happened once or twice, it feels like this is absolutely something Gladys used to bring up all the time. Do you know what I mean? Like, did I tell you about the time I stood in for Ruby Killa? I'm like, yes, you've showed us the dance.
Yeah, it'll be sort of that story where people sort of nudge each other like, she's telling it again, she's fucking telling it again. Like me when I met Al Gallagher. Oh, fucking hell, she's going to tell it again. Here we go. The father, though, I mean, this is very unpleasant. Apparently, the day after her mother died, he said to Carol, right, now your mum's dead, you've got to take her place. And he moved her into the bedroom with him and started to sexually abuse her. Which is horrible.
Just to roll back very slightly, when her mum was still alive, she didn't have a great relationship with her mum. So apparently her mum was, this is so dark, really disappointed in how unattractive and awkward Carol was. Which is just incredibly dark, I think. You know, if you have a kid who's a little bit shy, or let's use their words, awkward, I think you can be like, oh God, life's going to be a bit harder for this kid because they are not at ease socially, and that can just make stuff harder. But being disappointed that your child isn't attractive is such a fucking mad, fucked up way of looking at things. So I definitely think there was something going on mental health-wise with Gladys, because Carol comes home, she's 8 years old. These stories, by the way, only come out when she finally sort of cracks and moves away from this facade of a very happy family with a beautiful mum and a wonderful father. So she's 8 years old, she comes home from school, and all the doors are locked in the house and she can't get in. And Gladys is inside and she's crying and going, let me in, let me in. And Gladys is like, no, I want you to leave. I don't think you're my daughter. And she's not letting the child in the house. And eventually Charles steps in and says, you have to let her in. But from that day forward, she didn't really have anything to do with Carol. She was like, yeah, she's not mine. Which is would suggest someone who's not very well, right? Because
yeah, either that or the kid was a cunt.
Yeah, maybe the kid.
Let's look at it from both sides. Not only are you irritating and a bit of a little shit, but your pudding bowl haircut and your massive glasses are doing my head in. Now fuck off.
And so that's really grim, because that sort of suggests that Charles, the father, was more her protector, but he would beat her up. She would convince herself that it was fair. He's like, no, he's a good man, so I must have done something wrong, even though it was often fits of alcoholism that led him to beating her. So she's allowed back in the house then, but being ignored by her mother, unless her mother was beating her. So she used to beat the kids. She was abusive. She'd beat them with a belt. In fact, until basically Charles dragged her off or intervened. Vicky, her sister, remembers an occasion where Carol had been beaten around her face and all over her body, and she just was sat, like, obviously in pain, but just sat there really calmly reading a comic book, and she kind of wouldn't acknowledge how much pain she was in. So there's a theory that she sort of learnt this behaviour, that as a victim, your power is in forgiving abuse and, you know, the weaknesses, overlooking the weaknesses of your abuser, that kind of makes them respect you and need you because you'll provide forgiveness, which is often what abusers, it's that cycle of, like, they're abusive to you and then beg for your forgiveness and then you forgive the, you know, and so it goes on. So yeah, when her mother dies, that's when the molestation starts, and she was 15 and she developed a weird habit then, didn't she?
So, while all this is going on, I mean, you don't know how you're going to react to things, do you? You don't know how things affect you. Started running around the neighbourhood, absolutely starkers in the evening.
Yeah. I don't know, is that like the sort of 50s equivalent of wild swimming?
It's got to be.
You know, people are like, it's a real shock to the system and it's really good for my mental health. And I'm not belittling that because I think it does do a lot of good for people. But I wonder if just, like, getting your spaniel's ears out and going for a run around your village at night
helps,
naked.
Yeah. Maybe it does, yeah. I mean...
Also, can I just say, she developed very quickly as a young woman, so she had massive knockers young. And all I can think about is, like, well, I wouldn't run around naked. That would absolutely fucking wreck.
I know. Well,
flying everywhere.
I know. Well, the thing is as well, I think she started to use the fact that she had big breasts and was quite developed as a way to get attention from men. So she was sort of sleeping with quite a lot of lads from school and with her school bus driver as well. Ugh.
Oh, God.
She always turns my fucking stomach, quite frankly.
Yeah, caretakers, bus drivers, any, like, peripheral, especially teachers, any school staff is absolutely vile.
Yeah.
And huge, obviously, violation and level of abuse. So, yeah, she like I say, big boobs, lots of male attention, and she wasn't getting affection from home unless she was being used for sex by her father. So it was a way of sort of, like, boosting her self-esteem. Now, at about this time, her dad remarries, and when he does, the abuse escalates and changes. So he started beating her much more frequently, saying that she was fat, that she was stupid. He'd try and humiliate her, and she sort of would leave the house very often and try and stay with other men, other boys. And then one day she returned home to the house, and it was an absolutely cracker scene, wasn't it?
Well, I must say this bit as well. When her father remarried, he did remarry, and he sent her to different foster homes as well. So she was sort of... He remarried, I think it was, like, less than a year after his wife died.
Yeah.
So it was very much like, right, okay, I can't be bothered looking after you now. I've sort of got a new life, so you're going to have to fuck off to these foster homes. And she was sort of shunted around a bit, and which is why you can understand why she was looking for a bit of attention and affection, really, can't you?
Yeah.
Because it's been a bit of a shit time, hasn't it?
She's had a horrible upbringing. So one day she comes home to the family home, walks in to the living room. Their cat is dead, and there's a shotgun out, stained with blood, on the living room floor. And she's like, holy fucking shit, what's gone on here? Then her dad walks in, and he's like, I'm going to kill the whole family, and I'm going to start with new wife. So he goes to grab the gun, and she wrestles it from him, and then sort of has an argument with him, and then basically runs out with her sister Vicky. They then, as teenagers, end up splitting their time between foster homes and their grandma, who lives out in Michigan. Now, after a year of this, their dad tries to find them, and he finds that they're living with an uncle at the time in Indiana. So he's like, no, my daughters, they should be living with me, they're my property, and basically bundles them into a car and takes them back to California. So she's 17 at this point, and she just wants to escape, which is when she marries her first of 3 husbands. So she's 17 years old, and she marries 56-year-old Leonard. Now, age gaps.
I mean, age gaps, fine, whatever, but sometimes...
Absolutely fine.
But,
if the power dynamic is even, otherwise, it's weird.
Is a 56-year-old man and a 17-year-old girl. The only relationship there, and I'm sorry to say this, should be grandfather and granddaughter. I am not. I find this, like you say, it's a power dynamic, isn't it? And Carol's so desperate to be wanted and loved and feel useful. I think this situation should end up in. Anyway, Leonard it turns out to be an absolute cunt because he wants her to go out and sleep with other men for money.
Yeah, he basically wants to be her pimp. And he's got a drink problem. So thank God that she is sort of able to start to remove herself from this situation. So she was bisexual as well. What would usually happen though is she would have a horrible relationship with a man, and then she would have a relationship with a woman, and she would tend to leave the woman for a man, and she was sort of...
So the woman was a palate cleanser, basically.
Yeah, and a amuse-bouche between courses. But like, imagine the women who like would treat her well, and then she'd be like, yeah, I am going to go out with this piece of shit though. That must be Grace Petrie, who's absolutely amazing, has got a brilliant song called Last Man on Earth about this, and I just had like, I don't think I've ever done it where I've like strung a lesbian along, but had such a pang of like empathy of how many like gay women and gay guys, you know, like grow up basically being a boyfriend or girlfriend to a straight person while their actual boyfriend or girlfriend treats them like shit, and you're the one who's always there to be like pick up the pieces, and they know that they you know, they kind of sort of like rinse you for emotional support and stuff. And I just think that's really tough, and it must be a more frequent or common occurrence because of how heteronormative everything is. Anyway, so by the time she's 35, she's been married 3 times.
Yeah.
Her second husband is Richard Gase.
Yeah.
Now he is actually, I'd say,
all right.
He seems all right, doesn't he?
Yeah, so he's a writer, and he writes sort of sexy porn books.
Science fiction and pornography, the two mainstays of teenage boys, I would say.
The 2 mainstays of an incel. Also, do you know what I can't fucking stand? And I've just got to get this off my chest. Rick and Morty. it reminds me of the shop CEX and Chef's Arse, and
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That vibe. Also, it's not funny. Right. Anyway, that's off my chest. Don't at me. So he wrote all these things, and he noticed that Carol actually had a talent for writing, so he started to encourage her. Now, she wrote a couple of articles, and she wrote a short story that was actually published in a magazine. She also had a talent for drawing cartoons, which again he encouraged. Again, she gave that up, which, as you say, denotes a huge lack of confidence, doesn't it? You know, he's very encouraging towards her.
Yeah, he really likes...
Yeah, he likes her. He thinks she's witty, he thinks she's clever. You know.
She was very eager to please, obviously, so he was just like, this girl's great. And they seem to have actually quite a nice relationship. And then in 1962, her father, Charles, hangs himself.
Oh, God.
And then,
do you know, everything's going all right, and then this cunt does something.
Yeah, well, Richard is quite astute and said that he always felt after that Carol not only had burdened herself with the responsibility of her own abuse, like it was my fault, but now the death of her father as well.
Bloody
so,
hell.
Yeah, it's really tough. Now, they moved to Oregon, and in Oregon, he finds out that she is
Home
sleeping...
of 9 shoes.
Is it?
Yep.
Great fact there.
Lovely little fact for you.
He finds out that she's sleeping with men for money. I think he seems like... I'm happy to be corrected on this, but I genuinely think he seems like a really good egg.
He's either a good egg, or he's the best of a bad lot.
Yeah. Well, no, because... So he finds out that she's engaging in sex work, and he was sort of going, you don't have to do this. And he said, I tell you what, why don't you go to nursing college? And if you keep good grades, I'll pay for it. And that's you. It means that you don't have to do this, that you'll be a nurse.
Yep.
And now,
it's a nice gesture.
It's a really nice gesture. And by this point, they've sort of separated. But he's like, you know, I believe in you. I believe you can do this. So she goes to Santa Monica College. Now, not only does she keep her promise of good grades, she graduates as the valedictorian, which I've looked up, and means that you're the highest passing grade in like your year.
That's pretty good.
It's amazing. She qualifies in 1968, and she's sort of like back on track. They're separated, but they're really good pals. They're still in each other's life. It just seems like this point seems quite happy for Carol.
And he stays around as well, doesn't he? He's like always around if she needs him and stuff like that. And
yeah,
so he does
lovely.
seem a good guy, actually.
Yeah. Do you know what I found out? So I was having my eyelashes done.
Yeah, she is.
And, yeah, things are going all right, Rachel. And I was talking to my, I don't know what you call
Technician?
her. Technician, yeah. She's on her second marriage, and she's a little bit older than me. And she'd been with the guy since she was 16, and then when they were like 26 or whatever, they got married. And then when she was 28, she met her second husband, and she was like, as soon as I met him, I was like, bam, I'm going to marry that guy. And I remember my cousin was like, well, how can you marry him when you're already married? And she's like, I'm just going to marry him. and I was like, what? She was like, so I saw him a bit on nights out and stuff, and after a few times I just sort of came home and said to my husband, she said, we were like brother and sister. I was like, oh, I've met someone, I think I'm going to leave. And he was like, oh, thank God. He's like, I've met someone as well. And she said, and we literally just like shook hands. We had no solicitors. We got a divorce. We sold the house. And she was like, and we still see each other, and, you know, we'll be like, hey, and give each other a big hug. And I was like, this is the nicest sounding divorce in the world. It's incredible.
A good handshake.
Yeah.
Handshake.
Isn't that amazing?
And like,
but I was like, I want that.
And they're like, don't worry about it. We'll just share the bed until we get divorced. It'll be fine.
But they were, apparently they had this like brother-sister relationship anyway. They weren't happy, but they would been together so long. They just thought that was it. So I thought that was incredible.
That is quite nice, yeah. Very mature, very sensible.
But especially for, people like, you know, in their 20s. Wonderful. And she's very happy now.
I, to be honest with you, I still can't believe I'm in a situation where no one has asked me to marry them.
Fucking tell me about it, mate.
What is going on? I should be on my 4th marriage.
I couldn't be more eligible. Lock it down. Do you know what I mean?
The thing is, I'm not even give a shit about stuff like that. But I'd like to be appreciated. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm out there in the world, going round. I'm like a wild animal. You've got to keep me in. Show me.
You've got to be caged. If you see a particularly beautiful bird, you've got to cage it for the rest of its life.
Anyway.
I totally agree.
At this point as well, she's, as you say, she's the 2 children she has are with her 3rd marriage that we get to. What's his name, this guy?
His name is Grant Bundy. Now, he is a nurse, and they were sort of happy till their first son, Chris, comes along, and then it just starts to decline. So, following the birth of Chris, he starts to belittle her, he starts to push her around physically. That escalates into beatings, and then eventually she leaves Grant for a woman, and...
The palate cleanser.
Yeah, and then... she spends thousands on said woman, and then the relationship peters out. Now, in this time as well, she goes back to Grant, and her eyesight has really deteriorated, and she basically is partially sighted now. And Grant fucking hates it, because he's like, I don't have to take care of you when you're blind and our sons. So she's had a second son by this point. And he
nice
just
guy.
gets more, he gets more and more violent. So in January 1979, Carol gets the kids, does a midnight flit, and goes to a shelter so she was in a women's refuge. Now, about 2 weeks later, she manages to get an apartment in the San Fernando Valley. At this point, her kids are 9, Chris, and David is 5. So she moves to this place called Valerio Gardens, and it is run by a couple called Jeanette and John, known as Jack Murray. Mm-hmm. Now, Jack, she already knew from Little Nashville, that pub before, because he was an Australian guy who'd moved to the US, and he was a singer there, so he was a bit of a sort of like bit of a hero in the bar. He
moved from Australia to try and make it in America as a singer. Now, he apparently had a very good voice. He wasn't a bad-looking fella, but he was described as he was apartment block manager, as we've just mentioned, and also a part-time country singer. He was described as a low-rent Tom Jones.
Wow.
But also Tom Jones is so high up there for me that anyone who thinks he's Tom Jones is going to be low rent.
Yeah, that's true, isn't it? That, like, Michael Bublé's a low rent Tom Jones. Like, everyone's below Tom Jones.
Yeah, 100%.
Who's one of the shortest men who's ever walked past me.
Are you actually shitting me?
What?
Tom Jones?
I thought I told you this.
No.
When I was filming 8 out of 10 Cats a while ago, he was there filming something, but I didn't realise, and everyone was just like, after the show, everyone's sort of milling out, being like, thank you so much for coming, thank you so, all that sort of chit-chat in a corridor. And then all of a sudden it was like, can everyone get to the side, please? And there was like this noise of like West Wing, like walking down a corridor, like people being like, like pushing everyone to the side. And then Tom Jones comes wafting past. Ooh. Definitely felt like he was shorter than me, and he was in a Cuban heel, and he had a Welsh face mask on. His face mask was like the Welsh flag. And I was like, that is exactly what I want from Tom Jones.
Perfect. I love that. Love it. I did it. My Auntie Trish went to see... So my Auntie Trish is great, but she's not a prudish woman. I think I've mentioned this before. But she went to see Tom Jones years ago. And she said, I won't be going back. He was far too suggestive. It's Tom Jones.
That's so funny.
Far too suggestive.
So he's also described as well as being a low-rent Tom Jones. This is so funny. This is the kind of thing that, like, my mother would scathingly say about someone. What is that message that I sent to you that she said?
Oh, spiteful.
Oh, yeah, she loves to use the word spiteful.
I love that. Do you know, every time I hear that word now, I think of your mum. And it's, you don't hear a word for ages, and then you hear it, and you hear it all the time.
Yeah.
I've been hearing spiteful so often, and I've been using it as well. Very spiteful, that, isn't it? What a spiteful thing to do.
Oh, do you know what she was talking about as well? She was asking me about, when are you going to be on QI? Like, that's what I need. and she was like, I much prefer it with Sandy Toksvig. And she said, Stephen Fry always struck me as being very spiteful.
I love that. Spiteful. That's right. It absolutely cracked me up, that. I love it. Spiteful. It's such a good word, isn't it?
It is. It's a great word.
It's your mum's go-to for things, though, isn't it? Spiteful.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, Jack Murray.
He was described as being... He could have been successful, but, and this is the great quote, he managed to sabotage every opportunity he had with arrogance and self-importance.
Oh, great. So he's doing his thing at the little Nashville bar on occasion, doing his thing. He's also married to his wife, and he's running the apartment block. Now, Carol takes a shine to him, as we know, and she starts asking him, oh, excuse me, mister, hey, Jack, my washing machine's not working. Can you come round and take a look at it? And he'll go around, there'll be nothing wrong with it. And then she'll go, oh, my light fitting's not working. Can you come and have a look at it? She's making up all these issues that need fixing. He's coming round. Then he starts chatting to her, and she can't believe that he's giving her the time of day, apparently. Like, she's like, oh, he's like telling me all these stories about, when he's singing and stuff like that. And she's very bowled over by it. Now,
she's really doe-eyed, and he loves that he has a new audience for his stories, because he was also in like the Vietnam War, so he's got stories about that, and it was a new audience. He said that, I loved how open and appreciative she was. But he did help her a lot. He helped her with rent every now and then. He helped her access disability payments. He helped her find a new nursing job.
He actually helped her with her eyesight, because he said, you need to get a second opinion on this. And then it turned out she wasn't going as blind as she thought. She just needed a few tweaks and a little operation, and her eyesight rapidly improved.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so he did it, like, improve
Either
her
that
life.
Or he was like, listen, I'm sick of fucking you with those glasses on, love. Let's get this sorted.
Well, they didn't bang for ages. Now, Jeanette, his wife, was like, that woman's over a lot. And it did tip into the point where she was described, her behaviour towards him was described as stalking.
Yeah.
But she was like, I know that Jack is a cheat, but he goes for, like, leggy blondes, and I'm not worried about this sort of glasses wearing, like, quite dumpy woman with a short haircut. This is not his type. She's just infatuated with him, and she'd sort of seen this stuff before. They had quite an intense relationship as well. When they met in 1974, when he met Jeanette, 10 days later, they got married. A year later, they had their first kid. So, that is, they're really cracked on there. So, yeah, Jessica was born, and then two years after they met, their son Brian was born. So she was basically very aware of Carol being there all the time, coming into the office, asking for help for things. He'd drive her to get social security appointments and doctor's appointments. But Jeanette was like, I'm not worried about this one. Mm-hmm. But she should have been, because by the third time they'd sort of hung out and he'd helped her, she'd put his favourite beer in the fridge, basically. And then they started banging.
Is that all
and
it
she
takes?
just fell in love.
Is that he put the favourite beer in the fridge and that's it?
Yeah.
Good
yeah, that's it.
God. It's so American.
That's that easy.
It's like a Budweiser advert, that, isn't it?
What was it? I meant he's Australian, so I imagine it was a Foster's. And
this is going to be so boring. I'm going to say
it's brewed in Manchester, are you going to say?
They don't drink that
Really?
at all. Yeah, it's like piss to them. In the same way that I'm sure I said this, but Americans always think we drink Newcastle brown ale, and we're like,
right,
nah, you're all right, mate. So also, at this point as well, there's a bit of money issues going on. She gets money she sells a house that she lived in with Grant. She gets money and she starts to buy Jack lots of things. Like then she sets up a savings account with Jack as well. She also has an affair with Jack's wife's brother.
Mad.
Honestly. Jack then starts telling lies. He says that his wife, Jeanette, has cancer and he needs money to make sure that she gets the treatment she needs. Now, this is a lie, and he actually is using the money to pay off his van.
Jesus fucking
Very simple,
Christ.
man. She wants his favourite beer and a van.
It's really dark. So she was obsessed with him and would follow him around the apartment complex and, stand there and she was just obsessed. And what he would do is if he found an apartment that was empty, he would let her know or ring her, and then she would go there and then they'd have sex in the empty room. And when he drove her to the doctors, they'd have sex in the back of the van.
Ugh.
But I say they'd have sex, she would sock him off and she'd be like, he's so lovely. So she just became this infatuation really escalated, and she was just really loved up. She never thought she'd be with someone like this that she thought was a star and so handsome, and she thought they were going to have kids together, which was impossible because after David's birth, a second child, she'd had tubal ligation, is it called? Mm-hmm. Which I think is having your tubes tied, right?
Ugh, I hate that term. It makes me feel a bit queasy.
Yeah, and she thought that all the things that he did in terms of helping her, get disability benefits and getting the second opinion was well, he must love me. Why would you do that if you weren't in love with me? Which shows how badly she'd been treated in the past, but because him just being a bit helpful, she was like, this is love. Carol had this second eye operation, right? And she can see again. Now, something really dark happens in that she had sort of this affair with Jack had made her feel very beautiful, and she was like, oh God, I'll be gorgeous. And then she sees herself and she was like, this is not what I thought I looked like.
Oh, this is like a really dark fairy tale.
It is, isn't it? And she was like, oh, I'm still ugly and I'm still fat and he's really handsome and he's really charismatic. And she was like, oh God, he's going to leave me. So she sells her house about this time. She gets 25 grand and she's got regular disability payments coming through. So she's got loads of money. So she's like, you know what? I'm going to lavish him with gifts. So she does her house out. She does his house out. She buys him a VCR, which dates this, and a new desk for his office. She had spending problems anyway. With the previous marriage to Grant, she had massive credit card bills. In fact, he chopped them up when she left because she'd spent a month's wages on Christmas gifts for the kids, right? So she really wanted to, I guess, entice him. So she spent loads of money on beauty treatment. She'd go to the hairdressers. She was trying to upscale herself and make Jack stay and have a life with her. So she also opened a joint safety deposit box with him. She put 13 grand in there, and this is about the time that he says, oh God, Jeanette has cancer and I can't leave her until I pay these doctor's bills off. So she gives him 10 grand. And then he's like, oh well, I can't leave her while she's in recovery. And this is when she starts the affair with Warren, Jeanette's younger brother. Absolutely mad.
Oh my God, just have a day off.
I know. So we're getting up to Christmas now. This has all happened since October, by the way. And she really wants some alone time with him to, really seal the deal and make him commit to her. So she takes him to Las Vegas. I go, oh, thank you so much for everything you've done for me. And then they checked in, they were staying in the Continental Tower Hotel, and they watched a show together, a dance show. And then he went, yeah, I don't really want this, just went off gambling. And she didn't see him again until they got the plane home together. And he drops her off and she just walks home, but she deliberately leaves her case in Jack's car. So she's like, I want Jeanette to find out about the affair and then she'll kick him out and then he's mine. So then Jeanette knocks on her door and was like, here's your fucking suitcase, mate. You've been taking my husband on holiday. And she's like, yeah, well, he wants to leave you, but he can't because of your cancer. And she was like, what? I have never had cancer. So then she confronts Jack and he's like, yeah, sorry, I've been paying off my van with that money. And she was like really angry. But he was like, no, I'm still going to leave Jeanette. I just can't do it yet. It's Christmas. So she's like, okay. And then Christmas comes and goes and nothing happens. She bought loads of presents for him.
Oh my
He
God.
promised that he was going to spend Christmas with her and the kids. So she waited all day and was like, you can't open your presents yet, lads. But then she just sees him drive away in his van and she's like, right, fuck this. So she goes over to his house. She knows he's not there. Goes to Jeanette. I'll give you 1,500 quid if you leave him. And Jeanette's like, well, do you know what? If he agrees to that, I'll take it. Because she must be absolutely sick of her, like, the shit by now. So she goes home and she sits and she waits for Jack to come back. So he comes back and Jeanette says, listen, she's offered me 1,500 to leave and I will if you want me to. And Carol stood out in their driveway when she saw the van come back and was like, he's going to come out there and we're going to be together. And he was like, fuck off out. You need to leave me alone. And basically we said, get out of my life. I don't want anything to do with you. Leave me and my family alone. So one last ditch attempt. She gets all dressed up and she goes down to the little Nashville club.
Do you know what I imagine? This doesn't sound really off. You know what I imagine her version of getting dressed up is? Popping a bit of tinsel over her big glasses.
Shit, fucking. Yeah, she. When I think of her, I think of a League of Gentlemen character.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's the big boobs and the thick glasses. So she gets all dressed up. She goes there to meet Jack and say, she thinks, right, he's going to say, I didn't mean it. I actually want to be with you. I was only saying that because Jeanette was there. But she gets there and Jeanette and Jack are together and they're having a fucking great time. They're having a dance, they're having a drink. And that's when she's like, oh, I fucked up here. What have I done? And so she just got kind of lower and lower. And that is that night. She is like really drowning her sorrows, but she looks across the bar and she sees a very handsome blonde man who's smiling at her. And that is Doug.
Here we go. He spots Carol sitting at the bar. Apparently she was drinking and complaining, which I think is absolutely fine. And he notices her and thinks, she looks like a woman that I could manipulate. So he goes up to her and he talks to her. And she's, quite bowled over because he's relatively handsome. Although I've seen pictures and he looks like one of those stress toys that you squeeze and the eyes come out. So they chat and then things get heated quite quickly. Within a couple of weeks, I think it is, they're living together. So
wow.
Doug starts telling her about all these sexually bizarre fantasies that he has. Like, he likes to tell her that he's into, S&M. He likes to tell her that the sex that he likes. He tells her at one point that one of his exes was into necrophilia, which probably wasn't true. And he starts to laugh. Ha, 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 ha. So he's really testing the water here. Now, Doug, though, he's not fully committed. Even though he's living with her and her sons, he's sort of like, well, I'm here, but also I'm going to be seeing what else is happening out there. So he'll disappear for weeks at a time. Carol at this point meets a chap called Art Pollinger, who really likes her. He wanted to marry her. He's trying to help her sort of life out. He takes her to the money safety deposit box that she had with Jack. And this is where she realised $6,000 has gone. So Jack's still stealing money off her. And she's just making excuses for Jack as well. She's like, oh, well, he must have needed the money and stuff like that. So Art Pollinger's like, this is a weird scenario, I'm off. Which, fair enough, I think. So then Doug reappears. She's gone to get a driver's licence back as well, because obviously her eyesight has got better. And Doug says, I'm going to stick around now. And he says to her, look, you need to buy a big car. That's what you need. You need a big car, even though she's quite a small woman and struggles to drive it. And then he says, oh, well, you know what? I think really what we should do, what with me sticking around now and living with you, we should get 2 guns, but we need to get them in your name, right? So she applies for a licence, she gets the guns. 3 weeks after applying for the licence, she picks up, on May the 16th, she picks up, as she calls them, the toys, which were 2 guns that Doug wanted. So they drive out to test
That's
the
such
guns.
a Tory thing to do, to call a gun a toy.
We should be going to get the toys.
Yeah.
It is actually.
Go on, put the toys in the Land Rover, get the Springer Spaniels while you're there.
Have I got everything? Wellington's, wax jacket, the toys. Off we go. Oh. At this point, they start hitting the children as well. which is not something that she's done before. So the poor little lad's getting battered all the time. The children are having stress headaches. They're really struggling at school. The older child was begging Carol to leave because the poor kid's seen it all before, hasn't he? You know, he's seen his mum change and he's seen violence happen again. So then Doug also, he's like, yeah, everything's fine here. But also he's still pissing about looking for another woman because what he wants is someone to fully manipulate. He then finds another girlfriend who looks like Carol, but then it doesn't work out because he can't manipulate her. So then he comes back to Carol again. I feel sorry for these poor kids, me.
Yeah.
These kids are just like... The stress of this must be just horrific for them. So, yeah, I mean, this is a horrible environment for the children. But then in April 1980, something happens where Doug comes back to Carol completely covered in blood, doesn't he? His jacket, his teeth, his hands. And he says, oh, I've been in a bike accident. Then he says, actually, what happened was I was in a car and my girlfriend that I've been seeing, who looks like you, Carol, her boyfriend turned up and, I had to have a fight with him and I got attacked, and that's where all the blood's come from. But, as it turns out, he'd committed a double murder, hadn't he?
Fucking hell. It's so grim.
So this is where we go to part 2. Isn't it? Oh my God, this is a fucking bumper edition, this one.
We're going to talk about the murders in the next episode. We're going to record it in the next couple of days, so hopefully it'll all come out together. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to everyone who helped us on the Facebook page with ideas for Christmas merch.
Very
because there were some absolute belters there. I think we're narrowing it down, and then we'll get in contact with the people and make sure we send you a bundle of stuff who came up with the ideas. Some of you suggested the same ones, so I'm going to have to go off the time that you suggested, basically who got there first.
And thank you to everyone who's come to see me on tour so far. I've been really enjoying it. There's tickets available for places like Bristol, Brighton, all the bees, Birmingham. Still some tickets available, so have a look on my social media for where you can get tickets, and that's...
Oh yeah, and my Empathy Pains tour that didn't tour, I'm recording it at the Aberystwyth Comedy Festival. There's going to be a live recording. I would love for you to be in the audience. You'll find that all over my social media. And loads of tickets have gone already, actually. And then it'll be out for sale. And I would obviously love it if you bought it, because I'm really proud of the show, which is why I'm recording it, for posterity. Yeah, so I guess that's all the news, really.
Lovely. All sorted. Thank you for listening.
Thanks
See
for
you
listening.
later.
Bye.